In this video, I'm going to show you how I made these simple devices to help you mount your scope level on your rifle. Okay, so material-wise, this is probably one of the easiest ones that I've made so far. So what I've started with was it was a piece of off-cut wood. This is a fairly hard wood. You can use a softer wood, it doesn't really matter. This is a square piece, or you can just make sure that it is square or that the two sides are parallel to each other, exactly. So we're going to do this. What I then need is two T-nuts. This is an M6 T-nut, as well as two M6 bolts. This is about 50 millimeters or about 2 inches, if that helps. Obviously, this is also an M6, and they do fit into each other. I'm using two bolts with an Allen key head, and the reason for that is the head is smaller than a normal hexagon head that works with a normal wrench or a socket. Thereafter, I've got two water levels. Now, I've got these builder line ones. They're usually used on a building site to hook onto building lines to get the building lines level. Obviously, these little water levels that come inside them, I have taken them out. So I had two of those. What I also need is a hot glue gun, and I'm also using my table router, but a router is not necessarily. The first thing, method-wise, that I am going to do is I'm going to make a V groove into the wood with the router over in my table here. You probably can't see it, but it's a normal V bit. So it's a shallow V bit in the center line of this. The reason for that is just so that we can mount the water level into the V, and obviously then we're going to cut this piece of wood into the appropriate length. The length was just a slight bit longer than the water level, and that is obviously to leave space on the two sides for the bolts, like you've seen in the picture below. So that is the one thing. Now, with the T-nut, the main purpose of this would be to make a knob at the bottom that you can obviously loosen and tighten with your hands. Obviously, this is not going to be so comfortable to use. You can buy these separate as well, but since I've had these things laying around, I did make some of these knobs that you see here with obviously the hot glue gun and the T-nut at the bottom. If you want to see how I did that, I'll put a link in the description below of the video where I made those. So after I've done that, I have then taken the pieces of wood like so. You'll see there's a V in the side, in the top, and this is obviously parallel. So if I put it down like this, I don't know if you can see, we'll zoom in a bit, but the bubble is in the middle. Very important is that if you turn this around, the bubble needs to be in the middle both ways round if you put it on the table. So obviously it's very important to have a level surface to test this on, and obviously if the bubble is a bit more to the one side than the other, what you can do is you can only sand the bottom of this piece of wood a slight bit to the one angle so that the bubble ends up being level. Now this standalone piece, this is about 7 centimeters, about just under 3 inches. Now the reason this one needs to be extremely accurate is this is going to be the one that's on top of the gun or on top of the scope standing on its own, so that is very important. Second one that I've done the same with the top part, and then I've also taken another piece of wood at the bottom. This doesn't have to be exactly level once you stick it. What I have done with both these water levels is I've used the hot glue gun as well and glued them to these pieces of wood. They're nice and secure. A nice thing about the wood as well is if you've got a slightly off level one, you can slightly, while you're sticking it down on the glue, you can adjust it to the one side or the other as you are gluing it. The other one, I've got a normal piece or a thinner piece of wood at the bottom, and what I have done is I've used another piece of wood as a spacer in between, and I drilled a fairly big hole in the middle. You'll only see the two grooves of the big hole that's left, and obviously this would be the size of the bore of your gun's barrel. Obviously this one is about 20 millimeters. It's about just a bit more than 3/4 of an inch, and that is the size that we needed. Obviously we've got the two knobs at the bottom, and we've got the two Allen key bolts from the top. I have countersunk the holes for the heads, and since it is Allen key bolts like so, the heads are quite round and they're countersunk quite easily. I then also use some glue in the holes to keep them in place when you loosen or tighten these things. Obviously this is going to be adjusted around the barrel of the gun, and this does not need to be exactly level, but this one on the other hand is extremely important that it is. So now that we've got all these two pieces, let us go and see how to set up this whole scenario. Setup wise, we've got this whole stand here. We've got a rifle stand at the bottom here. In this case, we've got a rifle in the stand. This is an air rifle, but a rifle of any sort is basically the same. So first things first, we have only mounted the scope mountings on the rifle over here, as you can see. Now, in a lot of cases, the rifle itself does have a flat spot on the barrel over here, or on the housing of the rifle itself. In this case, it's rounded and not flat, but it does have a flat surface over here, so that is equally good. We're going to use that in this case. So first things first, we're going to take our single level piece like so. We're going to put it on the flat part. In some cases, it'll be over here, but in this case, it won't work. We're going to put it on the flat part, and you'll see the bubble is not center. So first you need to get the rifle itself level. So depending on your type of stand, you can either adjust the rifle to make this level, like so. You'll see the bubble move. Or in some cases, you've got a stand as well, which you can adjust like so. And you'll see the bubble moving as you adjust the stand of the rifle. It's got 4 adjustment points in this case, 1 on each corner. And you can keep on adjusting it until you see the bubble perfectly level. And then you can lock it into place, which has got locking wheels in this case as well. So now I know that the barrel of the rifle is completely, it's basically level. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our second piece like so. We're going to put it over the barrel of the gun like this. We're going to connect it with the 2 nuts from the bottom to clamp it onto the barrel of the gun, like so. And once this is clamped onto the barrel like this, you can level this out to be level as well, similar to that one. And once those two are on par, equal levels to each other, you'll know that they are synchronized. So the next step would be to take your telescope like so, put it on top of the weapon like this. In a lot of cases, you will remove the cap of the adjusting of the top part of the telescope, and it should have, or it might have, a flat surface. In this case, that is not. There's a little bump in the center, so we're not going to use that as a flat surface. I'm going to put the cap back like so, and then we'll have a flat surface on top of that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to remove this piece from the flat part of the rifle and put it on top of the scope like that. And now you can simply adjust the scope until you see the bubble center again, like that. And now you know that the telescope is parallel to the barrel of the weapon. So next thing we're going to do is put the caps of the telescope mount back on. We're going to put all the screws into it. Let's fast forward this bit a quick bit. All right, so now that I've entered all the screws of the mount caps, now there's a couple of important steps to keep in mind while adjusting this. So firstly, as you tighten these things, you might notice that the telescope or the level might change. So first of all, you need to know the torque specs of the specific telescope mount that you have, or for the specific rifle. That should be available with your telescope, or you can look that up. But the torque specs is quite important. I do not have a small torque wrench here today, so we're going to do this by feel of hand. Another important part to remember is to cross tighten this. So in other words, over there and then over here, and then back over there and over here. Just crisscross tightening, and to make sure that it is tightened level so that the one side is not more down than the other side, and that the gaps on both sides are fairly equal. So we're going to just slightly tighten them until they are all against the bottom of the mount, like so. And repeating over here as well. Remembering that the crisscross pattern is very important as well. And while you're tightening, keep an eye on your bubble to see that it stays center. So now it is fairly tight, and you'll be able to not move the telescope anymore like so. It will stay in the middle. And while you're referencing or you keeping an eye on the level, you can keep an eye on the level of the front level as well, that's mounted onto your barrel of your rifle, to see that that stays centered, and you might not have been moving the stand or the rifle in the meanwhile. And they need to be in reference with each other. And if they're both level, you should be good to go. So now you'll see that this is level, and we can start tightening this according to the necessary torque specs. Crisscrossing all the way like so. Just keeping an eye on the gaps on both sides of the mount as well, so that it is tightened level. If this is not tightened level, you stand the chance of adjusting the horizontalness or the parallel properties of your telescope. And once that happens, or if that should happen, you'll need to loosen both of these mounts, readjust your telescope a slight bit in the opposite direction of that the bubble was traveling, to ensure that it is level once you have tightened the mounts. So a good example would be, if you would see closer, this is a slight bit off center after tightening. So what that means is I'm going to slightly loosen all these bolts like so. And then going to counter the telescope in the direction that it needs to go, keeping in mind that the bubble is going to travel in the opposite direction once I tighten it again. So let us try that again. You'll see as I tighten it, the bubble is moving. So it's a good thing that we did adjust that beforehand. And as you are tightening all of these bolts, you can keep an eye on the bubble as well and know which side to tighten a slight bit more than the other side in order to keep it level. But once again, still keeping in mind that it needs to be parallel on all sides. And once again, very important to tighten this to the correct torque specs for your specific telescope. And while I'm keeping an eye on this and tightening it by feel, there we go. Now we can see that the bubble is perfectly center, and in front it is also perfectly center still. In other words, what we know now is that the telescope is parallel to the barrel of your weapon. Okay, so now while you're adjusting your telescope on the rifle range or on the target practice range, you'll see that the crosshairs, the horizontal one, will be horizontal if you adjust it to the left or right. So your bullet or your holes will not be more up or more down on one side compared to the other, as well as your vertical line will be perfectly vertical, and you'll be able to adjust this much more efficiently. So if you do like this project and you do like this idea, be sure to like this video and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so yet. If you have seen something that I might have missed in the video, please comment in the comment section below so that we can discuss it and perhaps make a follow-up video to correct any procedures or anything that I've missed in this specific video. So until next time, thank you very much, guys.